Okay, now we're going to talk about classes. Now, classes are a form of objects that have certain properties or attributes that go together. So that sounds kind of weird, but if we see some examples, it would be a little bit more clear. And so the properties of a class are that they have their own variables, so they have their own kind of descriptions, and they all have their own functions, or they're called methods in classes. And so a class has certain attributes to it, and it can also do certain things. So what does that mean in practical terms? Well, let's just write out a sample class, or just a general definition. Um, and then we'll write this out, and then when we go through this, it's going to become a lot more clear what a class actually is. So to create a class, we have to start with the keyword class. And you can see it gets color coded, so that means I've created a class. And then you just type in the class name. So you'll just, right here, you'll just put in class name. So to create a class, you do class, and then you type class name. And then you have your colon, like normal. And this, now everything that you write in here indented is part of the class. And now a class is something that you can create. It's pretty much you're defining your own little thing that you can create. So for example, we saw before that we were able to create lists, and we were able to create dictionaries, for example. And now a class is kind of different, but a class is also something that we can just create and we can save it later. And so when we create a class, we want to make sure that it has certain properties, so that it's initialized with certain properties, so that when we create it, unless we tell it to be different, at creation the class is always the same, so that we know how the class is like. Whoops, I wrote class team here. It should actually be class name, just as a general. And so to initialize it, or we would have to write def, and what we're doing here is we're creating a function inside of our class, and this function is going to initialize all of the attributes the class has, or all the values that the class is going to have. And so we'll just write this out here just to have it kind of as a reference for later, but when we actually go through practical examples, this is going to make a lot more sense. But to initialize, we have to actually do two underscores, write init, and then do another two underscores, and then we put brackets behind it. And so this is very similar to a function, and the only thing that we need to add in classes is that when we write functions and stuff, we always have to put in self inside of the function attribute. And this means that the class is always going to be referring to itself, so that it has its own attributes. And so when we interact with it, it always has to interact with itself, and so the first attribute should always be the self. And then here, just like a function, you put in a colon, and then you can define the attribute. So to create a class's attribute, you would write self dot attribute. So what we're doing right now is we're creating an attribute, or we're creating a variable that belongs to the class. And the way we do that, to show that it belongs to the class, we write self dot attribute. So the attribute is going to be part of the class, or part of itself. And now we can also just assign it a value, so we can just assign it 0, for example. And then later on, we can also define another function, def another function, and then just like function definition, we have the def, then we have another function, so the function name, and then the brackets behind, and then here we have to put in self again because it's going to be referring to itself, and then we put in the colons to indicate that we want to start the function, and then we have in here some actions, or action, so either or. Yeah, so this may look a little bit weird right now, but we're going to run through some examples and we'll really walk through them to make sure that we understand everything that's going on. But we'll just leave this up here just to kind of serve as a reference sometimes, so that we can always look back at it. But let's just comment this out, and let's make something a little bit more practical. Let's make a class, a team. So if we're organizing a sporting event, we want to make different teams. And each of these teams is going to have the same attributes though. The team is going to have a name, for example. They're going to have a location where they're from. So maybe we can start with these two attributes. We first start off with what is the team name and where are they from. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create the class. We're going to use the keyword class. And so it gets highlighted, so we see the keyword class. And then we just type in the class name. And in this case the class name is going to be just team. So it's just going to be a general team. And this tells us, this class name tells us what our class is going to be about. And then so we put in our colon. And we go into a new line. And now that we're indented, we're all part of the class. So we have to start off, let's just initialize our class. So let's write our initializing function here. We use the def to initialize. And now the reason we need this double underscore before and after is because what we're doing is we're overwriting the init or the initializer. So the initializer already exists, but we're going to be overwriting it. So we're going to give it a certain own function, or it's going to have its own functionality inside this class. And to indicate that we're going to do that, we actually have to use this double underscore. And so that's the reason why we have to do that. If it doesn't make a lot of sense right now, don't worry. We will come back to this later, and things will clear up with time. But let's just get it all in the code editor first, and let's make it runnable, and then we can really understand what's going on. But yeah, just right now, just for initialization, we have to do the double underscore. Then we write init. So this indicates that we want to initialize, and then we have to do another double underscore. This is just the format. And then we open and close the brackets. So just like a function, we have the def, and then the name, and then we have to open and close the brackets, and then we can put inside the variables. So in this case, let's just start with self. So if we want to interact with the class, we always have to put self inside the function. And so this lets us interact with the properties of the class. And so now we'll just create some properties of the class. So the first thing that we'll create is the team name. And so to make the team name part of the class, we have to write self dot, and then we write the variable name, which in this case will be team name. So what we're doing here is we've created a variable called team name, but using self dot actually makes this variable an attribute of the class. So it's part of the class team right now. And let's just give it a standard value, which is NaN. And then we'll also give it a location. So self dot, or we'll give it an origin, team origin. And here we'll also put nan. Okay, so what have we done right now? Well, right now what we've done is we've created a very simple class called team. And when we create the team, what we're going to get is we're going to give the team certain attributes, and those attributes are going to be the team name, and it's also going to be the origin, so where they're from. And in this case, neither of them are defined, so the standard value is just going to be NaN. But we'll get to this later. We'll also get to changing these values, but first let's just start off with the basics. And what we want to do next is we want to create a class in our code, and then we just want to print out the attributes. So we want to be able to create this, we want to be able to use this, because right now it's just here, it's just defined, but we're not really using it. We just created it, which gives us the option to use it. And then we want to be able to see these attributes. So let's just create a variable called team1. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it be a team, so a class team. And so to make team1 be a team, what we write is we just write the class name, which is team, and we have to write the open and close parentheses afterwards. And so now what we've done here is we've created what they're called is an instance. So the team1 is a variable, and it contains an instance of the class team, so an implementation of team. So here team is just kind of abstract, and It's there, it's generally defined for us to use later, just like functions, but we're not using it yet. And here, we're actually making it part of our code. We're going to be using it. So now we're making it an instance, or we're instantiating it. So now our team1 is part of the class team, and it has all of these features right now, which aren't that many, but we can expand on those later. So let's just print two things. Let's print the team name. So what we do is we write the variable name, which contains the class, which is team1. And then to print the team name, we just write dot, which indicates that we want to access the team. And then we write team name. And so what we're doing here is in team1, and then the dot means we're accessing part of it, or we want to do something to it, and we're going to access the team name. And you'll notice I didn't put any open or close parentheses after here, and that's because team name is a variable. And so just like with functions and everything, we use parentheses, but with variables, we don't use parentheses because they're just values. So this will print out our team name, and then to print out the team origin, we do something very similar when we do print, and we do team1. So team1 is the variable our class team is saved in right now. So we've created one instance of a team, and we've saved it in the variable called team1. And here we want to access also team origin. And now let's just run this, and then we'll go through it and we'll understand it, and then we'll expand on it a little bit, and through expanding and interacting with it, we'll understand it all a lot better. So we start off, and we instantiate our team. So we first define our class. We define an initializer. We say that when the class is created, what happens? Well, the team name is nan, and the team origin is also nan. And so what we do here with team1 being equal to team with parentheses is that we make an instance of this team, so that we create a team. And the default values that they're going to get is that team1's default name is going to be nan, and team1's default team origin is also going to be nan. And so what we do here in these print functions is that we access these variables inside, or these attributes of the class. So they're part of the class. They describe the class. They're attributes of the class. And so to do that, we write the variable name team1, and that's where our team class is saved in right now. And to access the variable, we do dot, which means we want to access something in this class, and what we want to access is the team name. And then to do the same thing for the team origin, we write team1 dot, and then here we also want to access the team origin variable, or the team origin attribute that we have here. And we remember we need the self here and here, because this means that whatever is going to be here is going to be part of the class, so that we're going to be interacting with the class. And the self.teamName makes team name an attribute of the class, so it makes it part of the class, and so that's what we need the self for. But all this will also clear up later, so we'll just expand a little bit and everything. But yeah, so that's why we see here nan and nan, which comes from the team name and the origin. So if we change this, for example, to name and origin, so if we change the team name to name and the team name to origin, the default team name and origin, and if we run this again, then we'll see we also get name and origin here. And so this lets us distinguish these two print functions a little bit better, and these two attribute calls. But yeah, it doesn't really matter what our default values are. So now that we've created this very simple class that has default values but nothing really else, maybe we want to do a little bit more to it. Maybe we want to be able to give it a name and give it an origin. So what we're going to do is we're going to write another function in this class. And this function that's in this class, it's going to define the team name. So we'll write a function, and here we'll call the function define team name, and then we open and close parentheses. So just like standard functions, we write the def keyword. Just now it's inside of this class, and then we write the function name, which in this case is define team name, And then inside here, because we're going to be accessing a part of the class, is self. So we always have to put the self inside here because we're going to be interacting with the class. And then the next input is going to be just a name, just a team name. Or we can even call it team name, it doesn't matter. And so then we put in our colon here. So this indicates that we want to start our function. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to make our team name equal to the team name. So we can do our self.teamName, which is the attribute. So team name is the variable inside of the class team, or it is an attribute of team. So team name is part of the team, and we're going to be making it equal to team name. And so if this is a little bit weird syntax or confusing, we can also shorten this so that we can call our input name. And so what we can do is we can make our attribute team name equal to the input name. So this is just like a function. We've defined it. We've put in input variables. You know, this one is just for the class, but this one is just a normal input variable. So we can put in a word or a string in here. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to assign the attribute of the class team name, and we're just going to give it a name. So let's test this out. Let's first print. So let's first stick with this so that we're just making an instance of the class. So we're just making a practical use of the class that we can use in our code, and we're saving it in team1. And then let's just print out the default name. And then let's change the name, and let's print it out again. So to change the name, we type in our variable that saves the class, which is team1. And now we want to access something from it, and we want to access define team name. Define team name. And so we open and close parentheses. And so what we're doing here is we're taking our team name, or our team that we've created, and the dot indicates that we're going to be accessing something in it, or doing something to it. And in this case, we're going to be accessing the define team name function that we've created. And now all we have to do is we have to put in a new name. So let's put in tigers. Let's call our team tigers. And so you'll notice there are two input variables here. And you may have also noticed that there's an input variable here, but I never actually put in anything in the self. So that always stays blank. I only put an extra input when there are extra input variables. So in this case, the extra input variable is a name. And so that's why I have to put in the name variable here, but I never have to type in self or something here. I don't have to do that. So the only variables I actually have to input are the ones after self. So yeah, so now we've defined a new team name. So what we're really doing is we're just accessing the team that's saved in team1, and we're calling the function define team name on it. And what that does is it changes the team name. And now let's just print out the new team name. So let's print out, and then we're going to access the team1, which is an instance of our team. And now, just like above here, we want to print out the team name. So we go into team1, and we want to access the attribute team name. So we type in team name here. And then below, we will still print out the team origin. And one thing that you'll notice is that when I use the function, so when I go use the define team name, I actually have to put the open and close parentheses because it's a function. But when I access the team name, because it's a variable or because it's an attribute, I don't put in the open and close parentheses afterwards. So yeah, so this is kind of one of those little things, but that may trip you up a little bit at first. But if we're accessing a variable or an attribute, we don't have to put any open or close parentheses. But if we access a function or a method, is what they're also called, that's part of this class, we do have to put the open and close parentheses. So let's run this and let's see what we get. So what we get is we get name, which corresponds to the team name, the default team name that's created here. And this is part of team 1. So what we do here when we do team 1 is that we just create an instance of this team. And this team 1 has the default attributes team name, which is name, and team origin, which is origin. And so when we print out the name, the team name, we get out the default name, which is name. And now what we do is we change our team name. So inside of this team name, we access the function define team name here, and we put in a new name. And what this does is that our team name variable is now equal to the name that we put in here. And so when we print out the team name, we see right here, we get Tigers rather than the default name. So we've changed the name. But our origin is still the default origin, so when we print that, our origin is still the default value. So let's also write a new function through which we can override the team origin. So let's write def define team origin, and this is going to be very similar to the defining the team name, but we're just going to define the team origin in this case. So just like a function, we use the def keyword. We have the function name, which in this case is define team origin. Then we need to open and close parentheses. And now we need to put in self because it's part of the class. And then we'll put in origin. So our input variable, or our second input, or our actual input, just like in here, is going to be the origin. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to make the self.teamOrigin. So the self.teamOrigin is the attribute teamOrigin that is part of the team. And we're going to make this equal to origin, so the input origin here. So what we're doing is, just like above, we've created a function called defineTeamOrigin, which is part of this class. And when we call this function that's part of this class, and we put in here, or we give it an origin name, what we're doing is we're changing the attribute teamOrigin, and we're giving it a new name, which is the name that we put in. So let's just do it again, or let's just do that down here. So let's access our class, which we've created in team 1, and let's define the team origin. So define team origin, and let's make the team come from Chicago. So our team is Tigers, and our team comes from Chicago. Yeah, so maybe let's also just print out the team origin before, and then we can run the code, and then we can understand what happened. So to print out the team origin, we use the same syntax like we had back here. We type in our variable that contains the class, so our team1, and we want to access the team origin attribute. So we notice here, again, there are no open and close parentheses because we're accessing a variable, or we're accessing an attribute. But here, when we call the defineTeamOrigin function, or the defineTeamOrigin method, it's a method because it's part of the class, so the functions inside of a class are called methods. Here we actually have to use the open and close parentheses, and inside of it we put in the new origin name that we're going to have. So if we run this, we see first we print the team name, and we get the default team name, which is name. Then we define a new team name by using the defineTeamName function or method that we've created inside of the class team, and we put in the input Tigers, which gets saved in name, and what it does, it makes the team name attribute of the class, so the self.teamName, it assigns it a new value, and that's just the value that we put in here. And so we print the team name, and now we print the team origin, and we get the default origin. And now what we do here is we access the class, and we define a new team origin. Just like up here we've defined a new team name, down here we define a new team origin. And so we access this method, which is part of the team1 class that we've created up here. So all of this is part of the same class. So team1 saves our team name, it has our team origin, it also has the functions define team name and the functions define team origin. So all of this is part of this team1, which is just an instance of the class team. And so when we call the define team origin function or method, and we give it the input Chicago, so origin is going to be equal to Chicago, then what we do here is we change the team origin attribute of the team class, and we give it the new value origin, which in this case is Chicago. So when we print the new, or when we print the current team origin, which has been overwritten from the default value origin to Chicago, then we get out Chicago. Okay, so cool. Now we've seen how we can, create classes, how to do the default initialization. We've seen how we can access these names later and change them. But what if we want to, create a class that by default has a team name and an origin? We don't want to need to change this later. We want to be able to create a class that by default has a name and an origin. How would we do that? Well, what we can do is we can change the initialization function, so we can add more input variables, just like we've done here. So we can add a name, for example, and we can add an origin. And then what we can change is that we can, instead of giving it a default value, what we can do here when we initialize it is that our team name attribute now by default takes on the name that we provide, and our team origin by default takes on the origin input that we have in here. And so if we run this code now, we'll get an error, and that's because we're going to have to change our team definition, or the way that we call our team here. So let's just run it once, but it's not going to work, and that's because we've put in these extra variables here. And so what we need to change is that when we create the team1 variable, which is an instance of this team, since we have two more values in here, we actually have to put their values in here too. So the name we can put in here to be Tigers, and the origin we can also put in as Chicago. And so now it would work. And so now what we're doing is we're creating the team, and we have to put in the name as well as the origin, because that's what we're requiring here. And so if we run this, now it's going to work. And now you can see our default team name changed from name to Tigers. And so nothing really happens when we change the name and print it again. And our default name changed from origin, and now we've given it a specific name, which is Chicago. So if we change these values, for example, and now we change Tigers to Dolphins, so first our team is called the Tigers and they're from Chicago, but if we messed up or the team changes their name later, then here what we're going to do is we're just going to change the team name to Dolphin, so we can still do this. So let's run and see what happens. So as we see here, we've created the team and we've initially called them Tigers, but one of us has made a mistake, and the team is actually called Dolphins. So what we do is we access the team, and we access the define team name method, and we put in the new name, and this changes the name of the team. And so now when we access the new name of the team and we print it out, we get the new name that we've created. But our team is still from Chicago, so we see that the default, or the value that we put in, Chicago here, is also here. And so when we define it, or when we change it to Chicago, nothing really happens because we're not really changing it. We're making it equal to the same value. Yeah, so this is kind of the simplistic, or the overview of teams and what you can do with them, or not of teams, of classes. And so you can create a certain class, so a certain object, and this object has certain attributes, so it has certain values. In this case we have a name and an origin, and they can do certain things, so we can change the name and the origin. Of course we can make it much more complex, but right now this is just the basics, and we will go on to deal with classes a lot too, and we'll make them a lot more complex, and we'll really build them up, and then we can really see the value that classes bring to programming. Maybe one more thing that we can do is that just to show that that the class team is just an abstract thing that we can use whenever we like, and that we can't only use one of it, let's create a second team. So let's make a team 2. And this team is going to be equal to, and so to create a team, we have to put in team, and then we open and close parentheses, and now we need to put in a name and an origin, just like we did up here. And so let's make this team be the Hawks, and let's have this team come from New York. So our second team is the Hawks from New York, and so what we're doing here is we're creating a team 2, and what we're doing is we're making it equal to the class team with the values of the name being Hawks and the origin being New York. So we can't just use this team once, we can call it over and over again, and we're saving it in different values. So now our team 1 is one team, and our team 2 is a second team, and their attributes are the same, but they all have the same, so their attributes names are different in the sense that the team 1's name is Tigers and the team 1's origin is Chicago, and our team 2's name is Hawks and our team 2's name is New York, but they both have a team name and they both have a team origin, and they both have the defined team name method or function, and they both have the defined team origin method or function. So that's what they are, and so we can use this, and so now we've created a new team. And at the very end here, maybe let's take out these extra print of the team 1 origin, and down here let's print our team 2 team name. Oops, team 2 dot team name. So now now here we access the team 1, and in team 1 we have it's this one. So our team 1 origin would, for example, be Chicago. And now we're going to access our team 2, which we've created up here, which is a different variable. It's still the team class, but it has different values. So the name is now Hawks rather than Tigers, and the origin is now New York rather than Chicago. So here we can print out our second team name, or the name of the second team, and below it we can print out their origin. So team 2 dot team origin. So the difference here is here we access the team that we saved in team 1, which is here, and down here we access the team that we saved in team 2, which is here. And we can see that when we access the team name in both, we just have to type in team name, because the team name inside of the class is always going to be called team name, but its value for each class is going to be different. And that's where this makes a difference. So when we access the team name in team 2, it's going to be Hawks, but when we access the team name in team 1, it's going to be the Tigers. So let's just print this out and see. So now we get, we print the team 1 name, which is Tigers, and then we change the name of team 1 to be the Dolphins, and then we print their name again, and we get Dolphins. And then we print the team origin, which is Chicago. So the team 1 team origin is Chicago, which we see here. And now, well, we don't really do anything here because we just changed the name of, or we just changed the origin of team 1 to be Chicago, but it's already Chicago, and we also don't print it, so we don't see anything from this line. And now we print our team name of team 2, and here we see Hawks, just like we have up here. And when we print the team origin of team 2, we see New York down here, just like we defined up here. So as we can see, we can create different instances of the classes, and the classes will usually, the different instances, or so team 2 is an instance of team 1 is an instance of team, so they're implementations, and these different instances or implementations will have their values inside here may be different, but they will all have the same basic attributes. So they'll all have the team name, they'll all have the team origin, even though their name and origin may be different, they'll all have the team name attribute and the team origin attribute, and they'll all have the defined team name method or function, and they'll all have the defined team origin method or function. Yeah, so here we can create different teams, but we can do the same things to them, and we can use them collectively. Now, maybe one more thing that we want to do is, what if we are not sure if we have a name? So teams can register with or without names and with or without origin, but they may register with name and origin. So let's make it that if the team doesn't indicate a name or an origin, we just give them a default value. But if they do indicate a name or an origin, then we assign that value to them. So so the way that we can do that is to give it a default value. We can change up here in our definition, we can make name equal to, and then here we can just type in the default value. So let's just make name equal to name. So what we're doing up here in our initialization, or in our function declaration, so when we declare the function or when we define the function, what we're doing up here is that we're saying there's a variable name, and if there's no input for name, then let's give it the default value name. So if nothing is provided here for name, let's give it the default value, which is going to be name. And let's do the same thing to origin. So here, if nothing is put up here for origin, let's give it the default value, and let's have it be origin. And so let's just maybe create a third team that didn't provide a name or an origin, and let's just see that in action. So let's create a team 3, and let's have this be another instance of a team, so open and close parentheses, but now we're not going to provide any information. And so that means, that means that the team didn't provide a name or an origin, and what this is going to do is this is going to, since we're not putting a name in here, the default name is going to be equal to name, and since we're not putting an origin, the default origin, or the origin is going to be equal to the default value, which is origin. And so at the very bottom here, let's also print the name and origin of team 3. So let's print, and then let's access team 3, and let's print their team name. So we have our variable name that contains the team that we want to deal with in the front, and then we put in the dot to indicate that we want to access something from it. And what we want to access is the team name. And so we don't have the open and close parentheses because it's a variable, or it's an attribute of the class. And so we'll print the team name of team 3, and let's also print the team origin of team 3. Oops. So team origin is the attribute. So here we're printing the team origin, which is part of team 3 right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a first team, and this first team's name is going to be Tigers, and they're going to be from Chicago. Then we're creating a second team, and the second team's name is Hawks, and they're from New York. And then we're creating a third team, and the third team didn't provide a name or an origin, and so they're just going to get the default name and origin. And so let's run this and let's see what we get. So here we see we've created the Tigers. So that's team 1, their team name is Tigers, and then we changed the team 1 name to the Dolphins. And so the new team 1 name is Dolphins. And then we print the origin, the team origin of team 1, which is Chicago. So right up here. And then we change their team origin to Chicago, but this doesn't really do anything because, for one, the team name is already, or the team origin is already Chicago, and we're also not printing it, so we're not going to see it over here. And then we print the team name of team 2. So as up here, it's Hawks, so we see Hawks over here. Then we're printing the origin of team 2, which is New York, and so we see New York down here. And now we access our team 3 that didn't provide any information to their name or their origin. And so they've gotten the default name, which is name, and the default origin, which is origin. So if we don't provide any information in here, name is going to take on the default value name, and origin is going to take on the default value origin. And so when we print the team name down here, we get name, and when we print the team origin, we get origin. Yeah, so now we've seen the basics of classes. We've seen how to give them certain variables. So we always need to use the self keyword. When we access their attributes, we have to do self dot and then the attribute name. And when we create functions, we also have to put the self in the input of the function. Is necessary because we're going to be dealing with the class. So the self always indicates that we're going to be dealing with the class. So when we do this inside classes, we always have to have the self keyword here. But yeah, we've seen how to create a simple class, which is a team, and the team has a team name and it has a team origin. And if the team name or the origin is not provided, they're given default values of name and origin. And we've also created a method or a function to change the team name. So like we did down here, we access the team name method inside of the team1 variable, and we give it a new name, and so we change the name, and so that's what we're doing here. We've also given the same capabilities to the team origin, so that we've created a method where we can change the origin of the team. Yeah, so we've created a very simple instance, or we've created a very simple example of a class, but it really shows a lot of the nice features that we can create different teams which all have the same properties that we can use and access and deal with. And so they're all on the same level. These are all different teams, and they have different values, but they all have the same internal attributes. So they all have names and origins, and they all have ways to change their name and origin.